Welcome to Combos from the Couch by LifeStance Health, where leading mental health professionals help guide you on your journey to a healthier, more fulfilling life. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Combos from the Couch. I'm Nicolette Lianza, and today I'm joined by LifeStance therapist Jordan Parmenter. We're talking about social media addiction, including the recent landmark case that found Meta and YouTube negligent for the addictive nature of their platforms and what all of it means for our digital well being. So, Jordan, gosh, always great to have you on.
I'm happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Very important conversation we'll be having today, for sure.
Yes, definitely.
So, to briefly summarize the case, a Los Angeles court recently found Meta and YouTube negligent for the addictive design of their platforms. The case was brought by a young woman who said the platforms caused her serious emotional harm. And she walked away with a multi-million-dollar verdict. So it's a decision that could have major implications for how social media companies operate going forward. So, Jordan, as we dive into this and this very important conversation, what do you consider is a social media addiction?
Yeah, I would say, and I would think that social media addiction is not too far from the addiction that we see in therapy. And
Mhm.
it's really, you had mentioned a question too about like what's addiction versus heavy
Yeah,
use. I
yeah.
think what kind of distinguishes the two is your ability to not engage with it. I think when
Mm.
it comes to addiction, there, depending on the stages of change model, depending where someone is at in their addiction, they might have the intention to fully stop their use or understand that it's negatively affecting them, but they just can't. And
Mhm.
sometimes maybe they've tried to and just not been able to be successful with it. And with addiction too, and I would think this applies to social media addiction as well, it's like this continued use of social media, even if you know that it has a negative impact on you. You notice that
Mhm.
there's like an emotional dependency on your social
Yeah.
media. There's a
Mhm.
preoccupation with it. It's something that you're always thinking about and you can't stop it, is what I would say differentiates that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great examples you gave there, because especially if someone's engaging in social media and it's really making them feel awful about themselves, but
Yeah.
they feel this inability to stop continuing to go
Yes.
back to it, then we definitely have a problem. They definitely might have a problem going on there. So,
Yeah.
are there other signs? What are some of the other warning signs that use might be becoming unhealthy?
One of the things I think is the biggest sign too is if there is an impairment to your ADLs, which are
Yeah.
activities of daily living, right? If you
Hmm.
feel like your social media is getting in the use of your ability to function on a daily basis and do the things that you do for yourself, big
Hmm.
signs. When I think about our work and like our notes and talking about like, is there any like functional impact or dysfunctional impact it's having on our clients, we talk about if there's impairment of ADLs, like if someone's in school, like is it like impairing your academic functioning or getting in the way of your occupational functioning? I think emotion dysregulation are big things too. So it's
Hmm.
like the overarching theme here is if you feel like your social media use is getting in the way of your ability to exist in the way that you used to before, I think that's a
Hmm.
major warning sign. Yeah.
So, at that point, is that when someone should consider seeking professional help?
I think so, absolutely. Because it's like you said, it's not gonna be like a full-blown diagnosis or anything like that by
Hmm.
means, but it's something that can be preventative, right? And you can
Hmm.
work on managing it so it doesn't exceed more than it already has. And when someone seeks help, I think like the first thing that they're going to do when they meet with a therapist is going to do an assessment. I think
Hmm.
this will be in later questions you were asking, but I
Hmm.
think it's also important to assess for co occurring or differential
Yes.
diagnosis. A lot of the symptoms that you see in like like addictive social media use is seen in a lot of different mental health diagnoses as well. So I think it's important to understand if it is co occurring or if social media is a direct result of another mental health diagnosis. One
Mhm.
thing that I think is very helpful, I don't, some therapists do it, some don't, is also in your assessment period with a client is having a conversation about the stages of change model.
Oh, yeah.
That's very much utilized in the addiction treatment world. I learned a
Mhm.
lot about addictions from one of my old supervisors at CSU, Stephanie
Mhm.
DeRoseby. I love her. But it's very important to have an honest conversation with a
Yes.
client, and a client to have an honest conversation with themselves too, where they are at with their addiction, or in this case, with their social media use, because where they're at in the stages of change model will definitely affect your course of treatment, and not in like a judgmental way, just more in
Right.
like an honest way. We try to set our clients up for success when they come here, and their treatment needs to be met to their own needs, right? And so this is just a way to help them feel like more successful with the treatment course. After that, I feel like when it comes to the actual treatment of
Mhm.
it, I think it's very common what we use with other clients in terms of like CBT. I think is really helpful. I know people have their qualms with CBT, which is totally understandable. And I think it's more about like the reframes of why we're using social
Yes.
media.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think harm reduction is also, again,
Mhm.
a treatment that's used in the addiction world. It's kind of to counteract the philosophy of like abstinence or going cold turkey from something, right? It's
Right.
like we think that's not sustainable, it's not long lasting, and it's not going to help a client. But harm reduction is used to be more sustainable and actually build on a client's like strengths and their self-esteem and help them feel more motivated to make more change, because in the simplest of terms, I mean, harm reduction is doing that harmful thing one less time, and if we do that and we build that over time, we think that's a more efficient way to work with people who are struggling with whatever type of
Right.
addiction. The last thing I'll say too with treatment is I don't know exactly how this would work, but in my brain it makes sense, is using ERP, the exposure response prevention therapy for
Yes. Yeah.
OCD. You
Mhm.
think about like the symptoms of social media use, it's very obsessive and
Yes.
compulsionary in nature. So
Yes.
I
Yes.
feel like those two could
Mhm.
coexist, and that might be a really helpful treatment too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent observation of that. I agree because it is a very obsessive about it. And you're right,
Yes.
the obsessiveness, I need to get on it, and the compulsion of then the behavior of doing it, of getting on it and staying on it and keeping you on it
Exactly.
and stuff. Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Yes.
Great,
Mhm.
great point.
Thank
Definitely.
you. Yeah, yeah.
So, what makes someone more vulnerable to social media addiction? Like, are there certain personality traits or mental health
Mhm.
issues that might increase the risk?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, I think social media is one of those things that just doesn't really discriminate. If you have access to a phone, you have access to social media, and I think that
Hmm.
is can be a little dangerous. I think what people will think of right away are like age, right? Like the younger
Hmm.
you are, I think the more vulnerable you are. Not saying that younger people are like dumb or anything like that. It's
Right,
just like your
right,
brain is not developed. And I
right.
think that there are certain social media apps that target that. Developmental status too kind of goes hand in hand with the brain. I think also one thing people might not think about is like the environmental factors, like
Oh,
what's
yeah.
going on in your immediate environment that might be negatively impacting your
Mhm.
social media use. One thing I see that's very common with my clientele, and these are clients that are in their 20s or in their 30s, is like the state of the world is a very hard thing for them to
Yes.
manage, and social
Yeah,
media is such an easy way for them to have complete access to
yeah,
it. And it's
yeah.
good to be aware of things and know what's going on, but there is a point where it becomes too much, and I think that's where people
Mhm.
get stuck. I mean,
Yeah,
it's super easy to.
yeah.
In terms of like personality traits, I think looking out for like impulsivity, emotional
Mhm.
reactivity, FOMO, like the idea of like the
Yep.
fear of missing out, I think is like really hard. I would say like lower self-esteem and
Yeah.
also like perfectionist. Like if you are relying on other people to, if you're relying on other people to show you who you
Yes,
are,
yes, yeah.
dangerous,
Yes,
or
very,
like
very
if
true.
you care about people's perception of you, I feel like unfortunately that can be a slippery slope. Or if you care about
Mhm.
how you want others to see you or you see other people, I think social media can be a little scary when it comes to that, a little slippery slope. With like the mental health stuff, I would say anxiety,
Yes.
depression, loneliness,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
isolation, 100%.
Yeah.
I would say ADHD with like the
Mhm.
impulsivity and the
Impulsivity.
reactivity. And like I
Mhm.
was saying earlier, OCD, like the
Yes.
obsessive thinking about social media,
Mhm.
the repetitive like checking behaviors I see a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like that kind of ties hand in hand with the lower self-esteem or feeling like you're more perfectionistic if you're constantly needing to check like your views, how many likes you've
Mhm.
got, who's viewing your profile, or just like looking at posts in general. I feel like those are some things to look out for with this type of stuff. And that's what I was saying earlier about like the co-occurring. Like, are we
Mhm.
working with something, a different diagnosis too? And like,
Right.
or is ADHD causing the social media use, or is OCD causing the social media
Right.
use? Like, what are we dealing with here? Because it could be other things too, in it
Yeah.
or in addition to social media use. Yeah.
Right. Good thing to
Mhm.
pay attention to.
Yeah. Yes.
So the plaintiff, or the young woman in this case, reported that she began using social media at age 6. My
Mm.
question to you is there an appropriate age to start using social media to help prevent addiction?
On a personal level, I'm like, yes, because not that I have any children or I don't know if I like want kids, but like if I think about it, I feel like I would unfortunately be one of those helicopter moms, and not like in a mean way, just like a,
Right.
oh my gosh, because it's so hard to contain like social media, you know, and
Mhm.
just thinking about what life was like before social media was so big, it was still hard because like as parents, once your kids start going to school, like you can't control that, right? And like there's a lot, and I think social media is so easily accessible that it feels really hard to know how to contain. So like on a personal level, I would say that yeah, there are, I feel like 6, you know, it's really really
Super
young.
young.
Like
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my head, like my kid might hate me, but I'm thinking like high school, you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
I wanted to do some like research and get like actual numbers, and I kind of found similar things. The American Academy of Pediatrics states that the youngest would they recommend would be 13, but there needs to be some structure around the use. APA, the American Psychological Association, what we follow, says
Mhm.
something similar where they say starting around 14 to 16 years old, but also with structured use. And
Mhm.
what they also both said is structured use specifically around the algorithm driven platforms, which is
Yes.
kind of what this case is talking about,
Yes.
which unfortunately are the most common and popular social media apps like TikTok, which with your For
Mhm.
You page,
Right.
Instagram has the Instagram Reels, and I think like YouTube is like YouTube Shorts or
Yep.
something. Like
Yeah.
that's what they recommend the use around because that's where it becomes dangerous. Like it's
Yeah.
used to figure out what you like to keep you
Yep.
engaged and keep you
Mhm.
locked in and to have like that new like what's next, what's next, what's next,
Yep.
what's next. And
Yep.
that's what becomes dangerous for people.
Yeah.
So that's what they said. I think I would also agree. And like as time goes on, you know, like as you get older and as you become more aware of what the social media is, I think you can have different boundaries. But to start, I would agree that the structured use is probably very important. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
And jumping back to the lawsuit, like you said, the lawsuit wasn't about the content of social media posts, but the
Right.
specific features that were designed to hook users, like the infinite
Mhm.
scroll and autoplay features. So knowing
Yes.
that the apps are designed to be addictive, right? How can we protect ourselves from a social media addiction?
Yeah, and like we were talking about earlier, like it's social media addiction can grab anyone. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
just like the youth. I think the youth is very important to think about because I feel like it's more preventative with like
Mm-hmm.
youth. Like we're able to structure that a little bit more. But I see this like all around. Just like when I was talking earlier about my clients that struggle with social media use because of like the state of the world, you know, like these are the
Yeah.
same conversations that we're having of like how
Yeah.
can we use some boundaries with that use. So in terms of preventing it or managing it, depending on like where you're at with like the stages of change or just where you're at with your use, I think intentionality setting and boundary setting
Mm-hmm.
are super important. If we can work in therapy of gaining some awareness around why you're using social media,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think is a great start. Like if you feel the urge to pick up your phone and go scroll on TikTok, why? Is
Hmm.
there something that you're distracting yourself from?
Right.
Are you really
Right.
stressed out? So it's like a coping skill, like being able to take a step back and have that awareness, then you're
Yeah.
better able to know what your needs are. And maybe we need to work on building like healthier coping skills.
Yes.
By no means do I think that you should ban social media from your life because that is a form of communication for a lot of
Yes.
people. That is a news
Right.
outlet for a lot of people,
Right.
but there
Right.
can be like moderation with it, you know? It's
Hmm.
working on like curating your social media use. So I think the intentionality setting of like building self-awareness around why we're using it, why we're turning it to it, and if we had like a toolkit of other healthy or coping skills that you can use, I think that's a great start.
Hmm. Hmm.
Boundary setting in terms of like there will just always be not great times to use your phone, and I think that one of those is in the morning. Like I had a client that really struggled with, she had built this routine in her head that she would wake up and she'd pick up her phone and start scrolling, give herself, she'd be like, well, I'm only gonna do it for like 20 minutes and then I'll get up, but then that would never happen, right? Or the media that she was consuming would like stress her out and already put
Oh,
her in
yeah.
like a fight or flight type of state. So it's
Yeah.
like
Gosh.
not using the phone in the morning, obviously not using the phone at night because we know that doesn't help with sleep, but
Right.
also again, when you are having like stressful times, that probably shouldn't be when we're using the phone. And that's probably like a thing that we need to check in with ourselves or do a mental check in or like a body check in, something like
Hmm.
that. There are, speaking of social media, because I am on social media, there are a lot of creators that I've seen lately that have been trying to do the same thing of like limiting their social media use. And they'll have like no scroll Sundays. There's like a creator that I follow that
Oh.
does no scroll Sundays. So
Mhm.
there's this app that's called Brick, and you can install it, and it basically like pauses all your social media so you can't use it for like a certain
Oh.
number of hours.
Okay.
So
Oh,
like
that's good.
you can use your phone to like call, text or whatever, but you
Right.
cannot use your apps
That's
for,
smart. That's good.
yeah, right. Because some people need
Yeah.
that. They need something to come in and just
Hmm.
shut it off. I do have a client that has a lockbox that she puts her phone in, and I'm
Does
like,
she?
whatever works for you, girl. I love it. You know, like it's
Uh-huh.
there, it can be look like so many different things. But again, maybe the Brick app wouldn't work for this client, but a box that she
Right.
can lock it away does, you know,
Right.
like, and the
Right.
whole idea is like as you start building that habit, as you start building that routine, okay, then maybe it looks different in the long run. You don't need to have a lockbox forever, but it's something
Hmm.
to like get you started. And
Right.
it's very helpful to have that, be able to do that like with a therapist, you know, like
Hmm.
it's not that you can't do that on your own, but you don't have to do that on your own if you
Right.
don't want to, you know,
Right.
talking about ADHD, it's specifically a lot of that work is like the parallel play part of it, you know,
Yeah.
like having
Yeah.
someone there. And
Yep.
so it's like if you feel like you need someone else to help you with that and support you in that in whatever way that looks like, that's totally normal.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Jordan, oh my gosh, you gave us so many tips of how to navigate this to keep ourselves from falling into this big hole of addiction with social media. So, my gosh, our listeners, I'm sure, are going to be so appreciative of all the tips you just gave them. So, thank
So,
you. Thank you.
of
And we'll definitely have
course.
you back on for
Oh, I can't
sure.
wait.
All righty. I'd also like to thank the team behind the podcast, Jason Clayton and Juliana Whitten. Thank you for listening to Convos from the Couch. Take care, everyone.